This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 32 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, August 8, 1908. I will add commentary to elaborate on what was happening in Westford 114 years ago. The first section in the August 8th Wardsman is the Westford Center section. Mrs. Florence Iles underwent a successful operation for appendicitis at her home, performed Monday by Dr. Metcalf of Boston, assisted by Drs. Wells and Sherman of this town. Mrs. Iles' many friends will be glad to know that at this writing she is doing as well as can be expected. Dr. and Mrs. Atwood of Daytona, Florida, are making their usual summer visit in town. Dr. Atwood likely stayed with his three sisters, Carrie, Lily, and May Atwood, who lived at 4 Graniteville Road. He also had a brother, Daniel, who lived in Chelmsford, and another brother, William, who lived in Florida. They were all children of Daniel Atwood, who moved to Westford around 1850 or 60, I believe. At the Congregational Church Sunday evening, John A. Taylor conducted the service, subject, How to Help the Church, bringing out many practical ideas on the subject. Sunday, August 9th, will be the last Sunday of regular service before the pastor's vacation of 3 weeks. John Taylor was the son of Samuel L. Taylor, the correspondent who provided the About Town section of the Wardsman. W.A. Perkins had his goods removed over the road by teams to his new home in Grafton Thursday. There is a fine collection of copies of Sargent's portraits at the J.V. Fletcher Library. I believe there was an art club at the library that provided portraits by famous artists periodically that were displayed at the library. Mrs. George E. Gould expects to be absent from town for the next few weeks visiting friends. The copious rains of this week will be a decided benefit to that part of the blackberry crop not already harvested. One-day shipment at A.H. Foss's, the first of this week, amounted to 40 crates. Westford was well known for its berry crops, and these were often taken into Boston for sale at the market there. The next section is the About Town section. The ball game last Saturday between the Wachusets of Leominster and the Westford team was in some respects the most surprising of the season. The Leominster team was a strong makeup and had not been defeated this season, and yet they went down and out in defeat by a score of 10-0. As has often been affirmed, the Westford team are a troublesome lot of young athletes for any whereabouts team to get into clinching orders with. This Saturday, they go to Townsend and give that strong team an opportunity to know the exact point of their strength. Both teams are well matched, and from the experience of former engagements, it is evident that it will be no 10-0 affair. William N. Wyman, who lives at the corner of Groton and Forest Roads, has been appointed by the selectmen a member of the police force. This is an essential appointment as the licensed wet goods institution at Ford's Village has made several troublesome arrests necessary. That's a reference to the recent bylaw that was passed allowing liquor to be sold, and one of the places granted a license was a place in Ford's Village. Mrs. Lydia Kelly Walkden, wife of James A. Walkden, died at her home on Main Street, Chamberlain's Corner, Wednesday, August 5th, after a lingering illness of over a year's duration. Besides her husband, she leaves 4 children, Albert, Mrs. Jessie Bell, Ida, and Herbert. Also 2 brothers, George and Andrew Kelly. Her son Albert, who has been in Colorado over a year, arrived home a few hours before her death. When health permitted, she was active in social life, an attendant at the Congregational Church, a member of the WCTU, and Westford Grange. WCTU is the Women's Christian Temperance Union. James F. O'Brien of Lowell has moved his family to his summer cottage on Providence Road. Luana Decatur is spending several weeks nearer the rising sun at Ocean Park, Maine. Miss Bessie Beatrice Talent, a graduate of Westford Academy and Lowell's Normal School, was recently married to John Miller, formerly of Lawrence. They will spend the summer at Old Orchard. She is the daughter of Andrew K. Talent of Pelham, New Hampshire, and a niece of Eben W. Talent on the Stony Brook Road, where she boarded when a student at Westford Academy. This is a not untypical example of a student from out of town boarding in Westford in order to attend Westford Academy. Daniel H. Sheehan is making preparations to commence haying. The weather is making preparations to prevent him. Daniel Sheehan owned the cider mill on Lowell Road across the road from the Pelatiah Fletcher House. The foundation of his mill is still visible on Cider Mill Pond. Harry O'Brien, who will be well remembered as a pupil in the public schools and active in the then flourishing football team, is now a member of the police force of Seattle, Washington. In distance toward the stars, he measures 6 feet 2.5 inches. He is a son of John O'Brien on Tadmuck Road. There are very few references to football in Westford in this time period, and this is one of the few of them. The interior of the Unitarian Church is receiving the attention of a cultivated eye and taste. New paper, new frescoing, new carpets, new cushions. My, everything so new and enticing, everyone will want to go to church. Nabnasset Pond is fast gaining in popularity, lying as it does about midway between the electric from Lowell to Ayer and Fitchburg, and the line of Westford Center, being easily and quickly accessible by either line. At the present time, several hundred campers are simplifying life on its shores, and this company is the YWCA of Lowell, on land of Charles Edwards. I might note that Nabnasset is spelled with a double T at the end, as it was commonly spelled in this time period in Westford. The next section, paragraph actually, is called Horse Struck. Tuesday evening at 9:30, a car from Lowell, that is a trolley car from Lowell, was nearing the townhouse. It struck a horse that had wandered too close to the track. The car was quickly stopped, and examination showed that a shaft had been broken. The horse had been hit in the head and was bleeding at the mouth. The animal was not knocked down by the blow, neither did it offer to move from where it was standing. J. Willard Fletcher, S.L. Taylor, and John A. Taylor, who were near the townhouse at the time of the accident, they're talking about the town hall, what we call the town hall, were asked by conductor Sargent if they recognized the team. This they were unable to do, but volunteered to take charge of it, and after endeavoring to find an owner, concluded to put it in the stable of Warren E. Carkin. In the morning, Constable Boynton was notified, who soon solved the ownership of the horse, as 2 ladies called on him the same night, inquiring for a stray horse. It proved to belong to Charles Crevier of Lowell, who owns a cottage at Long Sought For Pond. The team had been driven by his daughters to Graniteville and left without tying, and either wandered or was driven by boys to Westford Center, where it gravitated to the town watering trough, which is dangerously close to the electric tracks. I believe that's the trough that was in front of Town Hall and is now used as a flower bed, a small flower bed. After drinking this unlicensed liquid, it wandered as far as the White Post and slightly onto the track, where it was struck. According to the rules of the road, Conductor Sargent took the names of those who were passengers on the car at the time of the accident. I think the White Post that was referred to was a signpost that gave the distance to various towns that was once located on the common. The next section is called Reunion. The Spalding Light Cavalry Association, formerly Troop F Cavalry, which is an incorporated organization and as such looks more formidable in some respects than in its uniform and weapons of bygone days, will hold its first reunion under these new marching orders Thursday, August 13th at Nabnasset Pond. All members of the association and ex-members of Troop F Cavalry are invited. The National Military Band will have somewhat of a leading part toward entertaining. Dinner will be served. This is an old-time entertainer of about the age of time itself. After the eating feature of the entertainment, there will be some wise, witty words put together by some wise, witty folks who will prove entertainingly that, quote, man shall not live by bread alone, end quote. Plenty of boats and plenty of water, all the sports and games of the day, reminiscences of the old camping days, and all sorts of odds and ends, like an auction, too numerous to mention, will be there waiting for you to try them on. Let all associates of Spaulding Light Cavalry hear and obey the old command, forward march. I believe the Troop F Cavalry was formed about the time of the Civil War or maybe a little after it. I don't think it was ever in combat. It was used as an escort for distinguished visitors and things like that, and had members from not only Westford but many of the surrounding towns. The next section is the Graniteville section. The parishioners of St. Catherine's Church are now making active preparations for the coming picnic to be held at Lakeside Park, Forge Village, on Saturday afternoon, August 8th, to be followed by a social dance in Abbott's Hall in the evening. During the afternoon, there will be sports of all kinds, including a ball game between the Brimstones of Graniteville and the Lions of Forge Village, boat races, running races, and a good time in general. The electric cars run within 2 minutes' walk of the picnic grounds, and weather permitting, there is sure to be a record crowd in attendance. I believe this Lakeside Park was where the ball fields are on River Street. Mrs. Charles A. Eaton of West Bolton, PQ, that is province of Quebec, has been a recent visitor at the home of Mr. and Mrs. William Welsh. Mr. and Mrs. Frank P. Hawks and son Wesley of Melrose are visiting his parents, that is Frank's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Wesley O. Hawks. Mr. and Mrs. Charles Nicklin of Worcester are rejoicing in the birth of a son. Mrs. Nicklin was formerly Miss Jenny Dugdale of this village. This should read, this is an error, it should read Mr. and Mrs. George K. Nicklin are rejoicing in the birth of a son. George was the son of Reverend Charles Nicklin, who was pastor of the Methodist Episcopal Church at Graniteville from 1901 to 1903. George Nicklin, Charles' son, and Jenny Dugdale, daughter of Richard and Jane Moss Dugdale, were married in Westford on April 30th, 1906, by George's father. This is a good example of why you can't believe everything you read in the newspapers, or on the internet for that matter. The next section is called Baseball. The Westford Athletic Association defeated the Wachusett Baseball Club of Leominster on the grounds here last Saturday afternoon by the score of 10-0. I believe the Graniteville ball field was on River Street, where the Little League fields are located now. The Westford team was in great form and clearly outclassed their opponents at every stage of the game. A large crowd were in attendance, but were very quiet owing to the one-sided contest. And this was the same item that was referenced above under About Town. It appears to be a wise move on the part of the Westford management in having its home games played in this village, but the grounds here will have to be put in proper shape in order to play fast baseball. Another thing that adds to the unsightliness of the field is the practice some of the people have of using these grounds for a public dump. There is a special dump about 300 yards down in the woods beyond the ball grounds. The Brimstones defeated the Has-Beens last Tuesday afternoon by the uninteresting score of 8-0. The Has-Beens made many costly errors, while the Brimstones played an errorless game and deserved the victory. Batteries, Tom McCarthy and Ledwith for the Brimstones, Bob McCarthy and Hemer for the Has-Beens. J.A. Healy was the umpire. The next section is the Forge Village section. People passing the home of Nelson Prescott are attracted by the beautiful display of flowers in the garden about the house. This is the Levi Prescott House at 25 Pine Street. Much credit is due Burton D. Griffith, who has given so much time to their cultivation. In the early spring, he cut his foot quite badly while working in the woods, and after he was able to get about, he devoted much time to his flower garden, of which he is very fond. Marshall Brown of Littleton, a market gardener who supplies a number of the people of this village from his garden, informed the writer that he planted 2 1/2 acres of ground with potatoes, but the lack of rain has ruined the crop so that the yield will be about 25 bushels, when ordinarily there should be about 500 bushels. A wreck occurred on the Boston and Maine Railroad Monday morning. The 120 freight from Ayer to Salem was wrecked at North Littleton. The wrecking train was soon sent for and removed the wreck, although travel was delayed for some hours. The Lions played an Ayer team at Ayer last Saturday and were defeated by a score of 15-9. Joseph Bennett was awakened one night this week by a noise as if someone was trying to get in at a window. He hastily went downstairs and discovered a man partly in through the window. Mr. Bennett caught the first thing within reach, which happened to be the stove hook, and with a blow settled the man, for he dropped from the window and disappeared. Mr. Bennett and a neighbor made a search for the man, but were unsuccessful. It is reported that Mr. Bisbee of Lowell has purchased J.C. Abbott's cottage, and with his wife is spending the summer there. Mrs. Small of Everett, who is at her cottage, Pine Camp, was taken suddenly ill last Saturday. Dr. Blaney was called. She is now feeling better. These cottages are all on Forge Pond. Miss Teresa Lowther met with a painful accident this week. She struck her head on a sharp piece of iron, cutting quite a gash so that a number of stitches had to be taken. Miss Mary Hanley is taking a much-needed rest for a few weeks when she will visit friends. Visitors in town and at the cottages are W.B. Marshall of Everett at the Woodlands for the month of August, Frank Hildreth and family at Idlewood for a week, Mr. and Mrs. LaPointe and Mr. and Mrs. Ann Taylor and daughter of Leominster at Parrott's Cottage, Mr. and Mrs. Feasy of Lowell, weekend guests of Mr. and Mrs. David Lord, Mrs. Susan Morton of Bridgeport, Connecticut, Mrs. Louise Snyder of Hartford, Mr. and Mrs. George Kugel and 2 children of Yonkers, New York at George Kugel's, Mr. and Mrs. Holtz and daughter at Mr. Edwards, Mr. and Mrs. John Parquette of Nashua at her father's, Mr. LeClaire, Mrs. F.A. Sullivan, wife of Dr. Sullivan, and Mrs. Michael Sullivan of Haverhill, also Miss Nora Sullivan of Marlborough at James Sullivan's. This gives you a little idea of how popular the cottages around Forge Pond were during the summer. And that's the news in Westford for the week ending August 8th, 1908. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Nick Woodbury at Westford Cat for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions from the Wardsman at the Westford Historical Society's website at museum.westford.org, or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from a century ago. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.